Jacks RPG Podcast.
I'm in Max.
Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
I'm in Max.
You are listening to Happy Jacks RPG Podcast.
I'm in Max.
Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 28, Episode 12 of Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
And this is Tappy.
And that new feature that Zoom that I just commented on before we started actually screwed up OBS. which is why we didn't start the first time I played the music. So, in this episode of Happy Jacks RPG Podcast, we're going to start a couple new weekly things. One is I'm calling the initiative role, which is sort of like little bits of beginning advice for GMs, and then we have an email from who's it from? It is from Devin in Portland, and it is a report and a question for the show, and then we're going to end it with a sort of collaborative world-building exercise that's going to go on for a while, probably maybe months. I don't know. We'll have to see. And then I'll collect all the contributions to that world, and I'll publish it and put it on the web page so people can peruse it, use it in whatever way they want. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. And we do this show live at 10:37 p.m. Well, usually 10 a.m. Pacific time on Saturday mornings. And it's at some point it'll go back to Fridays. I'm not sure when, though. But it's on Saturday mornings for now. Or every other week. Once we hit July, I think we go weekly again. And we'll probably be in person by that point. So at least that's the way it's looking. So, okay. So my first sort of GMing advice thing is, I'm going to give you like a little scenario. You're at a let's say a game convention, and you get in the elevator and you're on the executive floor, 14th floor, right? And it's a smart elevator, so there's not a whole bunch of time. And you're in the 14th floor and you're going down to the second floor, which is where all the RPG section is, right? And so, and you get in the elevator and there's someone there and they're like, I'm just about to GM my very first game and I'm super nervous. And they recognize you. They're like, oh, you're one of those Happy Jacks guys. Expert, blah, right? So can you give me any GMing advice before I start? And ping, and the elevator doors close. And tick, 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 tick. What is your advice?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm not talking to me.
I would say don't be afraid to make shit up on the fly. You're going to go off script, so it's okay, and I think fun to go off script whenever they decide to go and just roll with it.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
just you should know your material, and if you know your material, you can tell them anything you want because it will all be consistent, and consistency is key.
There you go. That is the nugget. That is the nugget. I mean, players, assuming the GM allows it, players will get you off your script.
Yeah,
inevitably.
Especially because it's really hard to, like, oh gosh, if the players get the wrong idea at the beginning, you're fucked, and they will always get the wrong idea.
Yeah.
And once they have that little nugget of information, everything they do will be based off of that first nugget of information.
And every new thing that you give them is going to be colored by and informed by their incorrect first conclusion. Right.
And you cannot control that, in my opinion.
No.
You just can't. So once you realize what that is, the human brain likes consistency. We like things to make sense. We like patterns. So if you go with those patterns, and you can go in that direction and go off script, everybody's going to have a great time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this gets back to the bear hunting. The first time we played Savage Worlds, it was supposed to be about discovering like a secret Nazi conspiracy in the middle of the mountains around Flagstaff, Arizona, and there's an underground bunker with a giant Nazi dirigible and all kinds of stuff, cool stuff was supposed to happen. But I made a little newspaper for the first session, and on it, it just as filler, it was like, oh, there's been a bear attack, and it's killed some campers.
And I'm like, a bear attack? That must be evil.
And
we should check that out.
So they went and they shot the fuck out of a bear rather than seeing any of the other stuff. And they had fun. And at the end of it, I told them, because I let them do what they were going to do, obviously. Because, I mean, to me, it's not, I mean, if you're going to have that sort of metagame conversation, you really want to have it like a session 0 when you say, okay, this is the tone we're looking for. This is blah, 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 right? But to stop it like in the middle of a game and say, okay, you guys have made a incorrect assumption about the elements that you've gotten. That feels very unfun to me. To stop the game and say, okay, wait a second, the bear wasn't even meant to be a red herring. That was just filler.
Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, by the way, you guys are wrong.
Right.
It's not something that the GM really should do, because if the player's having fun, they're playing their characters and they're doing their thing. Right.
And you got to remember, I mean, the collaborative storytelling part of role-playing games is extremely important, and that involves the players, and that involves the GM also giving and taking, and maybe throwing away prep.
I hate the agency discussion, but you are, in a very metagame kind of way, taking away their ability to choose to do something other than what you have planned for them to do.
Right.
And that's why my advice would not be make sure the first kernel of information is X. Because you just can't predict how they are going to interpret that.
Absolutely.
Especially players who are like really, really, really into like a backstory they've made. Mm-hmm. Because they will color their decision because they are role-playing. They are trying to be that character in a way that you probably won't be able to know beforehand.
I agree. All right. Do you want to read the email we got? Or do you want to... Let's split it. It's kind of long. It's a couple pages. You want to start it? You want me to start it?
I'll start it.
Okay.
Dear Jackie Happers. Look what you've done there.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought it would happen to me.
Now, should I mention what that is? Is it old enough now where we need to explain the "I never thought it would happen to me" meme?
I don't know. Perhaps.
There used to be a magazine called Forum that was put out by Penthouse. Mm-hmm. I think it was Penthouse. And it was basically mostly it was letters to the editor. And it was people telling their sort of, oh, here's this erotic thing that happened to me. It was basically word porn. I mean, there were some pictures, but it was mostly word porn. It was stories about people, and then this happened, and then the pool boy came over. It's one of those things, and a lot of those stories always started with, "I never thought it would happen to me, dear forum. I never thought it would happen to me, but," and then on goes the story. Anyway, go ahead.
But all about the butt.
Right.
Since my first formal role-playing experience playing AD&D First Edition with my friend's older brother as DM all the way back in the early 80s, I've dreamt of running my own ongoing campaign. For years, despite garnering several friends who also enjoyed the role-playing hobby and playing a wide variety of RPGs, I never managed to keep a campaign going for more than 2 or 3 sessions. It wasn't for a lack of ideas, quite the contrary. I've never been able to write a one-shot adventure without imagining an accompanying campaign that said adventure would kick off.
Yeah, I get some problem.
The problem seems to be, have a mixture of what we would refer to colloquially as gamer ADD, where I would become captivated with the possibilities of a different RPG every week or two, and after high school, the inability to meet a regular game session. Throughout the decades, the idea of a regular weekly game session eluded me, always for a variety of reasons, but primarily because my seeming inability to stay focused on one game. I know these feels.
Yeah.
To be honest, I've wondered if I actually do have some form of attention deficit disorder, though my doctor has told me I probably don't. The term now is ADHD. Like, ADD doesn't exist. Like, some people think it's a lower form of ADHD, but it's been split up into a bunch of different things.
Right.
Because I have ADHD.
Right.
Though my doctor has told me I probably don't. So perhaps I just have to affect that I'm just not the sort of person who sees things through to completion. Please forgive the maudlin self-reflection. It's been a source of personal frustration. Or you can get a second opinion.
Right.
There are a whole bunch of different, like, ADHD is a big spectrum. It is also one of those, like, things you're born with, kind of like autism and OCD. Those are all in that spectrum of neurodiversity. And so there are so many different ways that your ADHD can manifest itself. That's really, really, really difficult to give yourself a diagnosis or compare yourself to your friends, because everybody has all these different elements to it. But if this is something that gives you, like, big problems in your life, and you've seen one doctor about it, getting a second opinion is a-okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
The trouble people have, and the trouble doctors have, is sometimes they're afraid people are seeking stimulants. So if you don't even mention medication, or just like, I want to know if I have this or not, you'll probably get a much more fair diagnosis than otherwise.
That reminds me of something that I want to mention that has very little to do with ADHD and a lot to do with stimulants. I watched a documentary, I think it was on Netflix. I want to try to find it real quick. It was what was it called? I can't remember the name of it, but it was about World War II and the Nazi use of crystal meth during World War II. They had a name for it. It was some kind of God, I can't remember what it was called. Navotrill or something. They had some name for it, but it was basically methamphetamine.
Well, is it methamphetamine or amphetamine?
It was a methamphetamine. Because they were giving amphetamines because I guess
amphetamines were World War I.
Well, they were, and World War II. Apparently, they were giving amphetamines to British pilots, or they had experimented with doing it, and the Germans, for some reason, weren't able to either get or manufacture regular amphetamines, but they could make methamphetamine. I don't know why, but there was, for some reason, one they could do and one they couldn't do. Probably the availability of some chemical that you need to make one and not the other. I don't know. I don't know anything about that shit. So they had you would get these little tubes with the label, and they were cranking this stuff out like tens of millions or hundreds of millions of doses of this stuff was produced during the war. And that fueled, they said in not all the cases, but in many cases, that fueled the Blitzkrieg. Because they gave it to the tank crews. So the tank crews, they would go and they would operate literally for 48, sometimes 72 hours straight at full capacity until they broke through and they got whatever lines established they need to get established. Then they let them crash.
There are also stories of shit like that happening in like the big city battles, like Leningrad and shit like that, where Nazi soldiers are without food fighting for like 72 hours.
Oof. And
now, man, that's a hell of a drug. It's bad shit.
But I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was on Netflix, or it might have been on Amazon Prime. I don't remember now. But it was fascinating because I had no idea. I mean, I figured in certain circumstances, especially in situations that are boring or tedious, in the desperation of war, you need to put people on amphetamines for a while. You put them on amphetamines, right?
Go pills.
Exactly right. I mean, they even allude to that in Battlestar Galactica in the remake, because at one point they have to go on stims because all the pilots have to go out, and they're on like 8 hours on, 8 hours off shifts or something like that, and they have a whole episode about dealing with the effects of the stimulants that they're on. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea that it was that pervasive.
I am absolutely sure that they used at least amphetamines, but them using methamphetamines doesn't surprise me. So the thing about methamphetamines, and what is really interesting about that with the Russian counterattack, is that so amphetamines fill your. This is a big tangent.
Right, I know.
your synapses with dopamine, right? And there are these transporters that take all this. You make tons of dopamine. These transporters take this dopamine and shove it into your synapses, kind of like osmosis sort of thing. But there are these actual like organelles that do it.
Right.
And so what methamphetamine does, so amphetamine makes you make dopamine. The transporters put it in there. They're in there for a little while, and then they take it back out when your dopamine levels drop. Mm-hmm. What methamphetamine does, it makes you make way more dopamine than the transporters move in as fast as it possibly can, and then the meth kills the transporters, so it can't get back out.
Oh boy.
or it shuts them down, but many of them don't unshut down. Is kind of how it works.
Right.
So that's why your first hit will always be the best you've ever had, but also you are permanently disabled for putting dopamine into your synapse.
Right.
Which is the opposite of the stimulant. So the next time you take the meth, it's a smaller hit, and it kills more of the stimulant. So you take even more to try and get back to that first one.
Oh, sure. Chasing the dragon, right.
So it permanently destroys your ability to get dopamine into your synapses, which means that you're lethargic, you're hungry, nothing makes you happy. It makes you more and more and more unstimulated.
Right.
Now, if you are off it for years, those shut down ones can start to come back, mm-hmm. but it is in no way guaranteed, and many people they're like, my life has been gray for 9 years. Like, I don't get happy, I don't like anything, and nothing can make anything better because methamphetamine has completely destroyed my. And also, they now have a form of ADHD because they can't concentrate on anything because dopamine is the chemical for salience. So right. Nothing means anything. Nothing is important. So think about that for for like 6 months, years. you have these soldiers who are constantly on methamphetamines.
Oh yeah.
By the time, like, the Russians and the Americans are coming in, well, they can take some meth to get back to normal, maybe.
Right.
But, you know, their ability to fight is completely destroyed.
And one of the things they talk about is the fact that inadvertently, but that at some point after the Normandy invasion, when things started going the wrong way for the Nazis, that the Allies, probably not intentionally, but ended up destroying the factory where the stuff was called Pervitin, or Pervitin, Pervitin. The name of the movie or the documentary is Blitzed: Nazis on Drugs, and it's on Amazon Prime. So, but it's fascinating.
It's like Nazis on Ice,
right? Nazis, right? Yeah, like the old Mel Brooks thing. But they explain why, and I didn't quite catch it because I was kind of watching it in the background rather than paying like full attention to it when I was watching it. But there was some reason why they couldn't use amphetamines and they had to use methamphetamine. And the factory where the Pervitin was being produced got destroyed. And then now you've got a real fucking problem.
Oh, yeah.
And the guys that are mostly using this stuff, I mean, it was apparently fairly widely distributed, but it was mostly tank crews. Because the tank crews, because they're sitting in a very valuable, very useful piece of equipment that isn't useful when they're all asleep. Mm-hmm. It's just a target. So it's a bomb magnet at that point. And they kind of attribute the part of the loss of the will to fight is the fact that suddenly their supply got cut off. And now what you're describing now with the effects of methamphetamine on the brain, that makes even more sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, what a tangent.
Anyway.
Nazis on drugs. But I thought it was crazy. It was like, because I guess back then in Germany, everything was legal. I mean, you may have to it may be difficult to get without a prescription, but everything was legal. Mm-hmm. They didn't know, and wow, meth. I thought that was crazy. Anyway, back to the email. Sorry.
But yeah, meth is seriously a not even once drug. Like,
oh yeah,
When it comes to like the shit that they used to tell us when I was in elementary school and high school, like, wow, like the ability for it to permanently fuck you up, like just the very first time, is ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, apparently, what it finally took to be separated from my friends and forced to get my gaming fix via online communication with them, beginning with Gmail's Google Chat, I began running a second edition AD&D game in the birthright setting with my best friend as a solo player. Then, after a few sessions, playing online makes it real easy to keep a game going. Because travel, especially in Los Angeles, but travel makes it really difficult, I think, to keep a game going. Then, after a few sessions, we added another friend from our shared LARPing days. We played short sessions, only about 2 to 2.5 hours once a week. I ran a mix of published short adventures, customized to my taste and setting, and my own ideas. Before I really knew it, I realized I'd been running a campaign for over a year.
Excellent.
Since then, I've moved to a different state and switched from Google Chat to Discord and Roll20. I've added more friends from home and LARPing. We decided to start playing the 5th edition rules, so we began a new campaign set in the world of Greyhawk, which I chose because it was my first campaign world I played back in my friend's brother's game in the 80s. We played for about 3 hours once a week, and we're about to play our 69th session. Nice. In addition to the D&D campaign, we also have a Saturday night gaming session where anyone can GM something if they like. We've got several ongoing campaigns in different game systems, from Marvel Superheroes, Call of Cthulhu, to Rhesus.
I know. I used to know what that was. Is that? I think it's a generic system.
I am not familiar with it.
the Anything RPG. I'm trying to remember. I thought it stood for something.
So it really is a GURPS clone.
Well, it's by S. John Ross, who was involved in Steve Jackson games at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something he did on his own.
Oh, earlier versions of the game were called GUCS, the Generic Universal Comedy System.
Oh, there you go.
A parody of GURPS, distributed privately beginning in 1989. Rhesus Latin for Laughter is a comedy game.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. All right, that's interesting. Last year, we were able to commemorate our dark future by running a few sessions in Cyberpunk 2020. I played a few sessions in Cyberpunk 2020, and wow, is that an old system?
Right. Well, he's playing what, D&D 2nd edition in this. Must be a while ago.
Yeah. And also, old systems can still be really fun.
Yeah, some of them.
Some of them you realize
some of them
why new systems are new.
Right. Yes. Some of them lack charm.
Yeah. Some of them lack charm.
Like the Old Traveler. I was looking, it might be kind of cool to run Old Traveler, and then I open up the giant combat table where it lists all the weapons that exist, and it lists all the types of armor and gives you the 2 hit modifiers because they didn't use DR. And it's like, oh yeah. Yeah. No.
Oh yeah, they thought that these tables were a great idea because it would save time.
Exactly. Rather than writing all this stuff out and saying, this type of armor does this against this weapon and this against this weapon, and no. That was a major innovation. DR was a huge innovation in role-playing games.
It'd be interesting to kind of like, in a sort of like History Channel esque thing, just like, hey, what are the innovations that we take for granted? Like, where did they come from?
Right.
Just because, it is now, the hobby's old enough now that we're in probably like a 4th or 5th generation of games.
Oh yeah, easily, yeah, I would think so. Do you want me to take over?
Sure.
So we're at anyway, the point I'm making? Okay. Anyway, the point I'm making is that one good thing that came out of moving away from my friends is that I was finally able to make my dream of running an ongoing campaign a reality. I'm not sure why I was finally able to overcome my lack of self-discipline and make this thing happen, but I suspect that being freed from the burden of arranging a physical meeting place and driving there went a long way toward making it possible for me. My players seem happy with the game, and we all appreciate being able to spend time together each week despite having been scattered across the country like dandelion seeds on the wind. I do miss the physical experience of playing RPGs, but playing remotely / digitally works really well for me. So that's my good news. Now I want to bring up an entirely different subject and see what you all think. I'm still a relative newbie when it comes to attending game conventions. I've been to a couple, and while the few I've been to in my adult life have been great fun, I've had a repeated experience that has caused my already shaky self-confidence to falter. When I attend a gaming convention, one of the things I look for is games I've never played before. Well, yeah, that's a great opportunity to go play games you've never played before. A convention seems to me like a perfect opportunity. Look, it's almost like I pre-read the email. To try something out that I've been curious about, or, if I own it, have never had the opportunity to actually play. So I think I've assumed that at least some people would have the same desire. I've been to 2 conventions, and at least one I participated in online, in which I signed up to run a game that was older or out of print. I stayed up late the night before the convention to print out all the handouts I wanted the players to have, and concocted a few remaining plot details I wanted to be in the session as I drove across the states to be there. Then, no one signed up to play. This wasn't always the case. One notable exception saw 2 wonderful players sign up at the last minute, but the other times I didn't get a bite. Even that there were other pretty obscurely themed games going on that got massive attendance, I wondered if maybe it was because I was a relative unknown in these podcast-based community conventions, could be, And maybe these heavily attended games were just being run by people who were popular in online forums. Or is it that I'm crap at writing game blurbs? I don't think so, but of course, I have to wonder. Have any of you had any similar experiences? You come up with what you think will be a fun and unique scenario for a convention, put together materials and handouts, and no one shows up. What do you do with that? Does it bother you? Or should I just grow a thicker skin? Is it just a natural consequence of running an older game system? When you put yourself out there like that, how do you feel with the complete lack of interest in your game, especially when it happens more than once? Thanks for taking the time to read my email, and I've been listening to you folks for years and being able to hear the old SoCal Ren Fair crowd talk about gaming is like getting to hang out with old friends for a while. Devin in Portland.
Well, I think we accidentally talked about that, which is the difference between older games and esoteric games.
Right.
Or unknown games. And older games are older games for a reason. And that would be my assumption.
It could be.
Is that maybe these people who get tons of people play relatively unknown systems, as opposed to systems from, like, eons ago. Especially if they're relatively unknown systems from eons ago. Like, if you're playing unknown systems from the late 80s, that may be more difficult to get people in than relatively unknown systems from now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you have a lot of games that are being produced now are descendants of more popular games like PBTA and Fate. You have people who've sort of made and kind of given away systems that people can use as frameworks to build whatever game they're building. So even if you're playing a game that no one's ever heard of, if it was made in the last several years, there's a good possibility you probably are already familiar with the rules to a certain extent anyway. Mm-hmm. As opposed to games in the 80s when it was like everyone's trying to come up with new shit. And some of them are coming up with good stuff, and some of them aren't. And some of them are coming up with ways that make the game run faster and better, and maybe, if simulationism is your thing, maybe a more simulous game. And then there's other people who are like, don't seem to understand the concept of time at all. And whether or not, I mean, did you ever play Space Opera? It was a science fiction game. Came out, I think it was by the company was called ICE. I can't remember what it stood for. But it was a science fiction space opera, science fiction role-playing game, and we made characters, and it took us like 4 hours to make characters. This is in the we were in junior high, I think late junior high, so 8th or 9th grade, and I recall us making characters, and then we're like, we're too tired to play now. This has taken too long. And we never played the game. I even had a copy of it because a couple of us bought it. Uh-huh. and then of course, Traveler, far simpler game. Even though I kind of gave it a little bit of shit because of the combat table, compared to Space Opera, it's very sleek design. But I think as far as the popularity thing goes, writing the blurb certainly is a good blurb is gonna help, because if people are, first off, it has to be a system people are interested in playing. And if you pick an obscure system that no one has ever played before, you've only got so much time at a game convention, right? You figure you've got, assuming that you're a normal person who needs sleep, and you're not like, some crystal meth Nazi tank commander, you're only going to probably play three game sessions a day, assuming 4-hour sessions. Maybe 4 if you're hardcore. So if a whole game convention is 3 days, that's like somewhere between 9 and 12 sessions max.
I've never played that much of the game.
No, I don't know anyone who has, but I'm sure there are people that are like, I'm here to play games, I'm going to play. Especially if you live someplace where you don't have, a gaming community that you can tap into, and game conventions are your only outlet for it. I could see doing that. But I mean, the busiest I've been has been two. Well, no, there's been some times when I've played 3 games in one day, and I was tired. I was tired by the end of it, and that's like run 1 and play 2, or run 2 and play 1, because running them is more exhausting than playing them, obviously. But you've only got so much time. So do you want to, if you got 3 game sessions and you can pick what you want to play, do you want to gamble away one of your 4-hour time slots on a game you've never heard of? Or are you going to instead pick a game that you're excited to play but you never had a chance to play? You see what I'm saying? So if you're like, if you pick something super obscure like Space Opera or something like that, a lot of people, unless they're in their 50s, have probably never heard of it. And anyone in their 50s is going who has any experience with it at all is going to look and go, no. So I mean, but there's not a lot of, what's the term I'm looking for? The nostalgia about games. I mean, occasionally you get it, but for the most part, at a game convention, nostalgia is not a thing.
I could see like paranoia.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
Like there are certain ones that are like wacky enough, but were never like super popular enough.
Toon.
Toon.
Yeah. Like stuff that stands out that would probably never get made again.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the problems, because if it's an obscure game and it's an old game, there's a reason that D&D is in its 5th edition. Now there are changes I would have made in it that they didn't, but I would certainly say that they improved the game. You look at 1st, 2nd, 3rd edition compared with what's out now. There's a marked improvement there. And I mean, look at Old Traveler compared to Mongoose Traveler 1.0 or 2.0. It's like that's hugely streamlined system now. There's no reason to play the Old Traveler because the new Traveler, the Mongoose Traveler, is so much better. It's just they took a good game from the 70s and modernized it and made it better. And there's a reason that we've had that modernization has happened. It didn't happen just on a lark. It happened because people were like, this part of this game is not fun. Is there some way we can fix this to make it more fun? Oh, look, we did. We succeeded. So the nostalgia thing itself may always be a hard sell.
Now, if you do, because I enjoy doing this sort of thing, if you do decide to take an older system and modernize it yourself and put that in the blurb, that might garner interest.
That's true.
From people.
That's true.
It may not, because they don't know who you are and if you're any good at making game systems or things like that. But I mean, that's a fun thing. I did that with I think it was 4th edition, where it was like the GM never rolls any dice. This was before PBTA came out.
Oh, right. Yeah,
and like the GM rolling dice sucks. So I'm going to change all this stuff around so that only you are rolling dice, so that you get like the highs and lows from dodging as well as the highs and lows from attacking, and I don't have to worry about any of that shit.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's just a hard sell to begin with.
It is.
Like I ran Tendra Bancha Zero a couple times, and that one is relatively obscure, but I still had people go like, I've been waiting to play this game for like, since I left Japan, or I've been waiting to play this game for like 4 years, and finally somebody is running it, and I was going to be damned if I wasn't going to make it.
Right.
I mean, there is a thing with people like Happy Jacks host running games. There is that popularity thing where people show up to take a look at it, or want to play, etc.
Right.
So we can't really talk too much about that, I don't think. But even the quote-unquote obscure games that I've ran are relatively modern, so people have heard of it and want to play it because they've never had a chance to play it. Whereas the older games, if they've heard of it, maybe they've played it, and so maybe they don't want to play it again.
Right. Now, I remember a group of 4 of us. We had a GURPS group kind of through college, and I think we were out of college by then. We were out of college by then, and there were 4 of us who got together from our old college group, and we decided to run. And this is at the Strategicon conventions, our local ones. This is a long time ago. This is probably in the late 80s, early 90s. Long time ago. And we decided that we were all going to run a GURPS RPG, like a tournament almost. And we had dumb prizes that we made and gave away to people. But we had, I think there were 4 of us. There were 4 of us. And we ran them through the same adventure, and then we looked at we figured out some way to score which players made it to the next thing, and it was by characters because we made pre-gens. So it's like, here's the thief character being played in 4 separate tables. Who was the best thief character? And the GMs all got together, and then we let the players know which players were in the next round. That was all full tables, and everyone who got invited to that second session, the championship session or whatever we called it, they all showed up, even though they weren't scheduled to. And that was long before Happy Jacks. I mean, that's a decade, 20 years before we ever did have. 20 years before we did, 20 years before we did Happy Jacks. And then the next game session, or the next game con, Bill and I came up with Uncle Melvin's Impossible GURPS Dungeon, where we made like the stupidest, it was the dumbest idea for a dungeon ever, and it basically was like each room is its own little torture chamber for PCs. And our backstory on it was it's this giant, huge, magical, mechanical thing. So as soon as you touch the doorknob to go to the next room, you can hear machinery moving, and it's randomly moving a room to put in place when you open the door.
It's the Cube or something. Have you seen that movie?
No.
I think it's called The Cube, and it's basically that, where each room has these. Well, some rooms are safe and some rooms are not.
Right.
And if you go into a not safe room, it kills you.
Uh-huh.
Like there's one where like monomolecular wild turns some guy into Kitty Chow. And so, but the rooms change. There's this huge cube that has all of these rooms in it, and if you try and go backwards, there are different rooms behind you. They might not be a safe
That's
room.
exactly how this worked.
Yeah.
When did that movie come out? Did they steal our idea?
I think they stole your idea. The only problem with that movie is that they had so there's a group of people who found each other. They don't know why they're there, etc. I think it's like some sort of like experiment or something. But like there's this guy who's like an idiot savant who can look at a number and tell if it's prime or not. And if there's a prime number, it is safe, or a prime number it isn't. I don't know what. But like 2/3 through the movie, when they figured this out, there's a room that should have been safe that wasn't, and somebody goes, "Oh, it's not prime numbers, it's factors of prime numbers," and then I left. I left. I was done.
That's funny. So, we didn't run the Uncle Melvin's Impossible GURPS Dungeon or GURPS Adventure, whatever it was called, as a scheduled thing. We ran it in open gaming. But and this has more to do with the fact that I'd already been working fair for a year or two, but I would get, because Bill had like gotten Sharpies and found some blank coffee cups and made like a picture of Uncle Melvin, whoever the fuck that was, and it says, "I survived Uncle Melvin's." And he gave those away to players who made it through the adventure. No, you got a mug if your character died. We made a bunch of pre-gen characters, and if your character was killed, we gave you a coffee mug, and it said, "I got Melvin." and we ran it in open gaming, and I got up and I started hawking in the middle of open gaming. "Come join Uncle Melvin's Impossible GURPS Adventure." And I had a whole spiel like see the wonder of the blah 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 blah, hear the blah 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 blah, like this big Barker thing from the 1920s or whatever at a freaking circus or a carnival. And of course, People are like, huh? And so they all come sitting down. We had a fucking full table. We probably had 7 or 8 people playing this stupid random dungeon, and it was a percentage dice. We had literally made 100 rooms for a fucking dungeon, and we'd roll on the table, and we'd say, it's this room, okay, clank, and then we'd sort of, and you can hear this when you listen through the door, because there was all foreshadowing shit. You'd open the door up, and it'd be something. It might be guys with laser rifles. Who knows? It could be some kind of monster. It was all different things. Some of them were traps, and then we'd scratch it off, and it was a continuous game. It's like whenever a new player came in, they'd open the door into a blank room, and there'd be a new player there, a new character there. That was our continuity, right? And then it's like, let's go to the next room, roll the dice. Oh no, we already scratched that one out. Roll them again. Okay, it's this one now. And we played that thing for hours and hours, just on this one day. But it was freaking hysterical. But there again, there's not everyone has the confidence or the idiocy to stand up in a room full of gamers and start barking like they're working at a fucking beanbag throw.
Like you're Carney.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, if you want to, I would say, and this may not be the advice you want to hear, but if you want to run games at game conventions that people will sign up for, run popular games. I hate to say the D word, but there's a lot of players for that game. If you want to play, I know a lot of people don't like it. Especially, this is not a D&D podcast, so we're one of the podcasts that isn't about D&D, but
one of the 4.
Right? No, there's more than that, probably.
Yeah, I know.
But
but all of those are probably about PBTA.
That's true. But
like they're the 2 kinds of gamers.
Yes. So, but if you want to make sure that you have players sign up, you got to run a popular system. Don't run something obscure. And
if you do run something obscure, don't take it personally.
Yeah, you can't, because it is people have a limited amount of time at a game convention, and they're there. People plan that shit out. I do. I know what I'm going to be doing what day, and always schedule where I'm going to have my meal breaks and stuff like that. And it's like, we have had people intentionally sign up for stuff that did not sound fun in order to have a good story for the podcast. But most people don't do that. If they're looking at it and it's like some obscure game they've never heard of from the 80s and they've never heard of it, that's a good reason not to sign up. You know what I mean? Because if it was a really good game, it probably would still be around in some version or another. So I don't know. That's just kind of an issue with running something obscure. Not probably what you want to hear. But run D&D. And if you really want people to sign up, run Adventurers League. Of course, that's a different kind of role playing. But it is there, or whatever they call it. Is it Adventures League?
I have no idea.
That's the organized. I think it's Adventures League.
If there's one thing that isn't my jam, it's Adventures League.
Right.
Just because of the format of it.
Right.
But people love it, and people love running it because you get to have like this constant story that keeps moving forward. You have it built in that you're going to run a campaign. You must run a campaign.
Right.
So.
All right. Hopefully we answered your question. I think we did. But I know that. I volunteered to run games, obviously before the podcast, and doing the podcast certainly changes whether or not my expectations for whether or not people will sign up for my games or not. I've actually gotten to the point. We got to the point where when we used to run games and ask for the pre-registration to be completely filled, right? Because the by default Strategicon only fills up half the seats at a game with pre-registration, so that there's seats for walk-ups, right? And then you can go and you can look at the board and sign. You put your name down as the other seats or whatever. And we got for years we would only sign up. We would sign up all the seats, so you could pre-reg and fill up our entire tables, all of our tables. And we got asked by the convention to not do that to allow people to come in, and they actually had some good reasoning for that. They have a lot of walk-ins. There's a lot of people who don't pre-register, so that gives them a chance to sign up for a game, and also it improves our visibility, because now there's a possibility that someone who's never heard of the podcast might sign up for a game and go, "Oh, it was a pretty good game. I might listen to this show." You know what I mean? So, but that, yeah. I think the best advice I can give if you want people to sign up for a game is to run something people want to play, that you know people are going to want to play, and that is not what everyone's favorite system is.
Or be funny in your blurb.
That helps. If
Don't
you
be
can,
serious.
I mean, because I started thinking about, when do I click through, because on ours you have to click on the game to see the blurb, and then it comes up a little pop-up, right? Or mouse over. You have to mouse over at least, and then the blurb comes up. And I thought, and it still needs to be a system that I'm at least interested in, or has a weird, peculiar name or something like that, that's going to make me get at least curious enough to make that extra effort to click. You know what I mean? Then there's people like Tomes, who run extremely obscure games that no one's heard of. Like, what was that one? Herkimer?
Oh yeah,
I can't remember from somewhere in Southeast Asia. I can't remember exactly where it was from, but and it was like this little self-published game that these dudes wrote, and people signed up for it, even though no one knew what it was.
Well, but he also has name recognition.
That's true, yeah, and he's also known as like the game, the role-playing game discoverer.
Yeah, he is the hippiest of the role playing gamers. Like, he's too hippie for Woodstock. I mean,
all right. Now I want to get to. We're going to try to do a. We're going to try to build a campaign world, and we're going to. I'm just setting down one ground rule. It's fantasy.
really,
So it's like, as a general genre, it's fantasy rather than science fiction or modern. So it's
it's not science fantasy either.
No, it's fantasy.
It is straight up fantasy.
Straight up fantasy. So what I'm going to ask is that every host, when they come on, give me a place of significance. That could be a country, a city, a province, a temple, a business, whatever it is, or an NPC, or a historical event, or a legendary artifact, or something like that. Something that sort of contributes to sort of either the backstory, or geographically, or character-wise, cast-wise, something that makes up this world. And this is the first one, so we have literally nothing to go on. And what I'll do in future ones is I'll kind of summarize the stuff that's been put in, so people can start building on top of things if they want. Because as you start building a world, that starts informing other things that happen, I think. So, do you have it? Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I mean, I have 2 places that
Okay.
I want to do, so I can do just one.
Do one.
I'll do one, then you do one,
And
then
I'm
I
going
do
to type. I'm going to type because we got to keep all this track of all this.
one. Okay.
What is your place?
So, the first one, I think, the one that I like the best, is called the Sanctuary Grove. And the Sanctuary Grove, it's basically based on the Mariposa Grove. So, just huge, giant trees, like giant redwoods. But it's also a cloud forest. So it is constantly covered in, maybe not always pea soup. There are times that you can see maybe 50 to 100 feet, but it is a constantly changing and rolling sort of fog that just never goes away. And so the giant trees supposedly poke up above this cloud surface. Like, sunlight does come down, and there are meadows and grasses and other trees, etc., but it is dominated by these basically giant redwoods. And the giant redwoods form a gestalt sentient being.
Ooh, there you go.
And they have and there are all these little tricks they can do if they don't like something, or like drop a giant pine cone on their head, or
And pine cones from very tall redwoods can kill you.
very easily, yes. And you know, there's flora and fauna in here that just isn't found anywhere else. So some of it can be used alchemically or magically. Like, there's significance to this place. But also these trees, like maybe it's the pine cones, or maybe it's, I think it's like, maybe they have two different nuts or something, just to be weird. But they will drop these things called yoe nuts.
Spell that for me.
Yoweh. And these yoe nuts are like these little hard things. They're maybe like 2 inches in diameter, and they will sprout legs and travel around and attach themselves to dead things, and like crawl onto the spine and attach itself into like the nervous system of something that is recently dead, and create what's called in this world a hamadryad. And so hamadryad are tree zombies and it basically makes like an exoskeleton, like a powered exoskeleton.
I need to know how to spell that
plant.
word.
Hamadryad
Yes.
is Hama, and then dryad,
Dryad.
dryad. Yeah. So like they're like these vines that come out of it and attach to like the arms, like, you know, like armored or not armored, but like an exoskeleton made out of like vines or wood or stuff.
Yeah, it's
like
like
that.
it's a living plant exoskeleton.
Yeah,
kind of.
For a dead thing that is controlled by this gestalt.
So it's controlled by the collective tree brain.
I would say that it works for, like it does things for it, but maybe not directly controlled.
So it has some autonomy, at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these are. I would say that they're more zombie-like than other things, but they are freakishly strong and freakishly fast. But yeah, have autonomy to do what the tree gestalt sentience want them to do.
Okay.
And they protect the trees and the grove, etc. Now, there is one like actual like being that they can talk to, which is the Guardian. I mean, you can come up with a better name. Oh, this is probably like an NPC.
Yeah, that's probably. Let's
do that later.
Yeah,
something else. Have somebody make the things up.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's this highly valuable, basically magical grove of giant trees that will kill you with plant zombies.
Now let me just ask a couple questions.
Okay.
Is this a hostile place, or do you have to go in with hostile intent to get screwed with?
I think it I mean, do you have a druid? I mean, I think there are things you can do to come in with to make the grove non-hostile to you, but they are difficult to find or know because most people just die.
Okay.
But I think most people, if you go through and start harvesting, let's do this. If you start harvesting stuff, then bad shit happens. But if you just walk through and, you know, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood and you have some nice hikes.
Right, that's what I'm wondering. Like if someone just goes in to admire the beauty of the trees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's only if you're here to take things.
Okay.
From the trees.
Got it.
Or if you die of natural causes, you will probably become a hamadryad anyway.
Right.
And it might be like a fun thing to like in the corner of your eye see like these creepy spider walking
plant
things.
Zombies.
They're always around you, and they're like these hard little balls of nothing. Like even killing them is difficult, but if you killed one, then you have a real problem on your hands.
Then all of a sudden, bloop bloop, they start dropping all around. Okay.
So yeah, and for like the fauna and stuff, you like sky's the limit for weird stuff you can have if you want. Like you can have like uh, normal plants and animals, but this is essentially an island where nothing can come in and nothing goes out. So you can have like island dwarfism or island giganticism of things that you would normally have.
Okay.
So, you can have 12-foot foxes and, 6-inch tall bears.
No, is it literally an island, or is it sort of like it's its own ecosystem as an island?
It's an own ecosystem
Okay.
as an island. It's not literally an island. And so, in my head, it looks like the Mariposa Grove, but most people haven't seen that. So, like, pictures of that might be useful. Or just of, like, the High Sierras in general. That's technically the High Sierras, but, like, the High Sierras in general.
Where is the Mariposa Grove? Oh, it's in Sequoia. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize. Yeah, sequoias are big fucking trees.
They're huge.
Until you actually see them, I don't think you appreciate how big they are, because they're not the tallest trees, and they're not the widest trees. But there are no trees as tall and as wide as sequoias.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could really describe it. They are big fucking trees, and they used to cut them down and make cabinets out of them.
Right?
Because it was like, I make a lot of wood out of these things.
I only have to cut one down.
Right. Oh, yeah, build a whole house out of one tree, probably.
Yeah. Except that there are only 80 in the world.
Right. And
So, yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, just, like, they're like these giant redwood, giant sequoias that are even bigger and even taller. And they're just kind of dotted everywhere. But again, here, like, there's only like 80 or so, maybe 100. And they're all intelligent, but their intelligence is all, like, together into one super being.
Right. Okay. All right. I also have a place, and I don't have a name for it. But this is, I'm kind of creating two things, because this is a city that was built next to a bridge that crosses an enormously wide river. I'm talking about a river that's maybe 3/4 of a mile wide. Huge, huge river. Swift running river. And
So impassable except for this bridge.
Except for the bridge.
Literally impassable.
Right. And the bridge, no one knows who built it. But it's definitely not a natural formation, but there's no records of when this bridge was built, and it is built out of like stone. It almost looks like it was carved. And it's so sturdy, people have been building onto the sides of the bridge, because being right next to the water or over the water is extremely handy for all kinds of commerce and businesses and such.
And sanitary reasons.
Exactly. And the bridge is not only extremely long, going across this extremely wide river, but people have been building on either side of this bridge over the water for centuries, to the point where it's not only extremely long bridge, it's also an extremely wide bridge, and people now live on it.
So kind of like London Bridge back in the day?
Kind of, yes. But way wider.
But yeah.
Right, it's like...
And way longer.
So it is so wide, and has been this way for so long, that beneath the bridge, there is its own ecosystem of lightless animals that no longer need light. Like eyeless fish and things like that live underneath this thing as well.
That's awesome.
And it has created, the problem is, of course, as people built this bridge out, no one built it high enough for ships to be able to go underneath it. So the only thing you can put underneath it are very small, like shallow, like very low profile craft, like rowboats or things like that, or canoes or something. But starting probably a dozen years ago, people would go underneath it in like a rowboat or a raft or something, and they wouldn't come out on the other side, and no one knows why.
That's awesome.
So, there you go. and I'll try to remember that and type as I do.
Does the level of the water ever go up and down?
Probably it does, not seasonally, but it probably goes down over a course of maybe like a decades-long cycle of drought, and rainy times. So it probably does. You probably that it probably narrows a little bit, but it's probably still, when it narrows, it's probably still half a mile wide. Mm-hmm. But you get all the the muddy shores and stuff like that. But
do people find stuff in there?
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And but they never find remnants of the boats that go underneath it and don't come out on the other end.
Yeah, they've just disappeared from existence.
Exactly.
It seems.
Okay, so that's
awesome.
That's that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and play us out. Is it this one? This one. Nope, this one. Yeah. Thank you for joining us for season 28, episode 12 of Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Stu.
And this is Tappy.
And I'll see you 2 weeks at 10 a.m. Pacific time at happyjacks.org/live. Until then, stay safe and we'll see you.
We pursue this hobby from Michigan to Australia and maybe East Timor. Be a